You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Colorado. This is the Engage the Rockies podcast. I am your host, Jarvis Caldwell. This week's episode, we're calling it the Ballot Initiative Special. And what we wanted to do was highlight for you what ballot initiatives actually made it through the process and ended up on the ballot for November election. So on Monday, September 9th, Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold certified the ballot for the general election. So this is what we're going to see in November on our ballots. Now, a couple quick things here. Engage the Rockies is a nonpartisan nonprofit. So we're just going to cover what is going to be on the ballot. We are not advocating one way or the other. We will have an episode coming up here in 2 weeks, I believe, with the Common Sense Institute, who is also nonpartisan, but they did a study on some of these ballot measures that we're going to mention here today. And they're just going to kind of give us an idea and a breakdown of what the economic impact and other things might be of some of these ballot initiatives. Again, they're nonpartisan, we're nonpartisan, so they're not advocating one way or the other for the ballot initiative, and neither are we. So we have 14 total ballot initiatives that will be on your ballot in November. 7 of them are legislature approved. They went through the process of being passed through the legislature, and now they're going to be on the ballot. And then 7 of them are citizen-led. If you're unfamiliar with the ballot initiative process and how these come to get on the ballot in the first place, I definitely recommend go back probably 3 or 4 months ago. It was one of our first episodes. We had on Advanced Colorado's Michael Fields to discuss the ballot initiative process, how you start it from coming up with the idea through the process of getting signatures and actually getting it approved, going through the title board, all of that, to where it actually ends up on a ballot. It is very informative. It's about 30 minutes long, and by the end of that episode, you'll completely understand, for the most part, on how to get your own initiative on the ballot if you want to do so. So the general election takes place Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, and we're going to start with the legislative ballot initiatives that went through the legislative process. So if you remember, if you did see that episode with Michael Fields, a way to tell if it's legislative or citizen-led is whether it's like Amendment A or Proposition 1, right? So if it's a letter, that means it went through the legislative process. If it is a number, that means it is citizen-led. So let's go ahead and start with the ones that were referred by the legislature. So first we have Amendment G, which is modified property tax exemption for veterans with a disability. So this is an amendment to the state constitution. So it requires 55% approval because it's adding that language to the Constitution. This measure adds the expansion of eligibility for the property tax exemption for veterans with a disability to include a veteran who does not have a service-connected disability rated as 100% disability, but does have individual unemployment status. So that's an amendment to address our veterans with disabilities. Moving on to Amendment H, judicial discipline procedures and confidentiality. So this is also an amendment to the Colorado Constitution, so it does require 55% approval. This one adds an amendment to the Colorado Constitution concerning judicial discipline, establishing an independent judicial discipline adjudicative board, setting standards for judicial review of a discipline case, and clarifying when discipline proceedings become public. So that's going to address some issues that the legislature felt in the judiciary branch. Amendment I, constitutional bail exemption for first-degree murder. So this is also amending the Constitution, so it will require 55% approval instead of just your standard majority. Shall there be an amendment to the Colorado Constitution concerning creating an exception to the right to bail for cases of murder in the first degree when proof is evident or presumption of guilt? So basically, an exception for the right to bail for cases of murder. Do you feel that there should be exceptions for that, for the right to bail for murder? And that was Amendment I. Amendment J, repealing the constitutional definition of marriage. So this one went through the legislature earlier this year. Amendment J, shall there be an amendment to the Colorado Constitution removing the ban on same-sex marriages? Now, even though this is amending the Constitution, I believe because it's not adding to the Constitution, it's just repealing. As far as I'm aware, based on the Secretary of State's website, it actually does not require 55%, if I'm understanding that correctly, because it's removing language from the Constitution. It's not adding. Amendment K, modify constitutional election deadlines. So this is amending the Colorado State Constitution, so this does require 55% approval. Shall there be an amendment to the Colorado Constitution concerning the modification of certain deadlines in connection with specified elections? Proposition JJ, retain additional sports betting tax revenue. So this is not an amendment to the state constitution, so it requires a simple majority. But the Proposition JJ language will say, without raising taxes, may the state keep and spend all sports betting tax revenue above voter-approved limits to fund water conservation and protection projects instead of refunding revenue to casinos. Right. So this is a Tabor, basically ballot measure. The state overcollected taxes. So without raising taxes, may they keep and spend that revenue that was generated on water conservation and protection projects instead of refunding it to the casino, which they would have to do if it was not approved by the voters. So you're going to have a decision to make. Do you feel like the casinos should get the money back that they overcollected, or do you want to have that money diverted to water conservation? And again, that's not that's a one-time thing. It's not any kind of amendment to the state constitution, so it just requires a simple majority. Proposition KK, this is actually one that we covered, I believe, when we had someone from the Colorado State Shooting Association on, and we mentioned this as it was going through the legislative process. I don't believe it had been voted on yet, but this is Proposition KK, the firearms and ammunition excise tax. And this came from House Bill 24-1349. So what this proposition is going to say is, shall state taxes be increased by $39 million annually to fund mental health services, including for military veterans and at-risk youth, school safety and gun violence prevention, and support services for victims of domestic violence and other violent crimes by authorizing a tax on gun dealers, gun manufacturers, and ammunition vendors at the rate of 6.5% of the net taxable sales from the retail sale of any gun precursor part, or ammunition, with the state keeping and spending all of the new tax revenue as a voter-approved revenue change, right? So basically, to break that down, is they're going to raise taxes. The legislature that passed this bill, putting it to the voters, it is raising taxes. So therefore, because of Tabor, it requires voter approval, but they want to raise taxes 6.5% on guns, gun parts, and even ammunition, and diverting that money to gun violence prevention, at-risk youth, services for victims of domestic violence and other violent crimes. If you recall from the episode that we had covering just gun bills in general, we kind of talked about this, and kind of the initial take was very curious on the part of our guest, which was, in essence, it feels like you're taxing, almost punishing the law-abiding gun owners who are going to gun stores and purchasing guns and ammo to pay for victims of crimes that likely probably weren't caused by the law-abiding gun owners. So something to consider there when looking at that one. And I definitely recommend going back to that episode that we covered, the gun laws that were going through the legislature back in April, I believe. So those were all for the legislative led, right? So those are the ones with the letters, the proposition, like Proposition KK. These are the citizen led initiatives. So the citizen-led initiatives, those go through the process that we discussed with Michael Fields, where it requires a certain amount of signatures to get on the ballot. There were, probably 40 or 50 citizen-led initiatives, and only 7 of them actually made it through the entire process, got approved, got their signatures approved, and are now going to be on the ballot. And you'll notice missing from these is Proposition 50 and Proposition 108, which were the property tax ones led by Advance Colorado, because we had that special session a few weeks ago, and the agreement, I guess, between Advance Colorado and those in the legislature and the governor, where if they passed a bill that Advance Colorado had agreed upon, and they got everything that they felt they wanted out of it, they would pull those ballot initiatives. So you will notice that Proposition 50 and Proposition 108 are not on here, and were not certified by the Secretary of State's office. So we're not going to see those. Starting off with Amendment 79, right to abortion. So this citizen-led, it proposes a change to the Colorado Constitution. So this requires 55% approval because it's adding that language. This initiative would change the Colorado Constitution, recognizing the right to abortion, and in connection therewith, prohibiting the state and local governments from denying, impeding, or discriminating against the exercise of that right, allowing abortion to be covered service under health insurance plans for Colorado state and local government employees, and for enrollees in state and local governmental insurance programs. So if you notice Amendment 79, right to abortion, it doesn't state any kind of limits or anything like that. So this is going to be a constitutional right to have an abortion in Colorado. According to this, there's no limits in there, so it doesn't limit it to a certain amount of weeks or a certain amount of trimesters or anything like that. So 55% approval will be very interesting to see how that one goes. Colorado already has basically, I would say, probably the most lax abortion laws in the entire country. After, I believe that was in 2022, when Roe v. Wade it was pretty obvious, because the decision had been leaked very early, but it was pretty obvious that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned. And so the legislature rushed through some pretty lax abortion bills. So this looks like this is just going to codify it in the Constitution. So that way it will not be changed anytime in the near future. So depending on how you feel about abortion on that one, and if you don't believe there should be any limits, that will probably affect the way you're going to vote on that one. Amendment 80, school choice in K through 12 education. So this is proposing to make it a constitutional right for school choice in Colorado. So again, requires 55% approval. This would be an amendment to the Colorado Constitution establishing the right to school choice for children in kindergarten through 12th grade, and in connection therewith, declaring that school choice includes neighborhood, charter, and private schools, homeschooling, open enrollment options, and future innovations in education. When I first read that, I found it pretty interesting that they said, and future innovations in education. So basically, they want to put it in the Constitution that you have a right to school choice, whatever that may be, charters, homeschooling, your local neighborhood district school, and future innovations, which is probably pretty smart to put that in there, because there may be some new technology that is offered and recognized as attending school, and it's accredited. And so this would cover school choice from this point forward. So that's Amendment 80. Proposition 127. Now, this is the prohibit trophy hunting bill. I am working, and I think maybe in the next week or so, we will have a guest on to discuss this specific ballot initiative, prohibit trophy hunting. So this is a statutory change. It is not a constitutional change. And the proposition will read as this: there shall be a change to the Colorado revised statutes concerning a prohibition on the hunting of mountain lions, lynx, and bobcats, and in connection therewith prohibiting the intentional killing, wounding, pursuing, entrapping, or discharging or releasing of a deadly weapon at a mountain lion, lynx, or bobcat, creating 8 exceptions to this prohibition, including for the protection of human life, property, and livestock, establishing a violation of this prohibition as a Class 1 misdemeanor, and increasing fines and limiting wildlife license privileges for persons convicted of this crime. I mean, I think that one's pretty straightforward. Mountain lions, lynx, and bobcats. Obviously, this one's gotten a lot of attention in the news. Your pro hunting organizations very strongly oppose this, from what I've seen, and even certain conservation groups who lean towards the pro hunting side. And then I've seen other conservation groups opposing this one here, depending on how you feel about hunting. And I found it interesting that it did carve out exceptions for the protection of life and property and livestock. So if that one were to pass, it'd be interesting to see what does it mean for the protection of livestock. Say, if you have an animal that is continually stalking your livestock and killing them, do you have to catch them in the act of killing the livestock, or can you go hunt them down? If you know it's one particular predator that keeps coming back to your livestock, can you then go hunt them? Is that considered protecting your livestock? Because I don't see anywhere in here that it says immediate protection of the livestock. So that'll be an interesting one. Proposition 128, concerning eligibility for parole. So when we had Michael Fields on to talk about the ballot initiative process, Michael Fields from Advanced Colorado did mention this towards the end of that podcast, so I recommend you go back there and listen to that one. This one is called Concerning Eligibility for Parole. It's also referred to oftentimes as truth in sentencing. And so this is kind of a long language on this one, but basically this has to do with having to serve, so violent criminals having to serve 85% of their sentence. I'll go ahead and just read this real quick. Shall there be a change to the Colorado revised statutes concerning parole eligibility for an offender convicted of certain crimes, and in connection therewith requiring an offender who is convicted of second-degree murder, first-degree assault, Class 2 felony kidnapping, sexual assault, first-degree arson, first-degree burglary, or aggravated robbery committed on or after January 1st, 2025 to serve 85% of the sentence imposed before being eligible for parole, and requiring an offender convicted of any such crime committed on or after Jan 1st, 2025, who was previously convicted of any 2 crimes of violence, not just those crimes enumerated in this measure, to serve the full sentence imposed before beginning to serve parole. So that'll be a very interesting one to see. If you recall, we discussed with Michael Fields that right now, on average, violent offenders only serve about 43% of their actual prison sentence, and then oftentimes the recidivism rate, I think, is very high. And so the argument there from the guest that we had on is that a lot of times people are getting out, they're not even doing half of their sentence, they're getting out early, and then they go and commit another crime. And so the idea of this would be to maybe prevent that second crime from happening, from getting out too early and making them serve out their almost the majority of their sentence. I guess you could say at least 85%. So that would be an interesting one to see right now with the crime rates going on in Colorado, to see how the voters decide how they feel about that one. Moving on to Proposition 129, establish qualifications and registration for veterinary professional associate. So this one is not a constitutional change. It says, shall there be a change to the Colorado revised statutes creating a new veterinary professional associate profession, and in connection therewith establishing qualifications including a master's degree in veterinary clinical care or the equivalent as determined by the State Board of Veterinary Medicine to be a veterinary professional associate, requiring registration with the state board, allowing a registered veterinary professional associate to practice veterinary medicine under the supervision of a licensed veterinarian and making it a misdemeanor to practice as a veterinary professional associate without an active registration. So I believe the idea here, from what I've read and heard, is that maybe there's a shortage on veterinarians, licensed veterinarians who've went through all of the proper schooling. And I could be wrong about the shortage. I'd heard that there was a shortage. So this is just trying to basically expand the access to professionals to be able to offer those kind of veterinary services there. So that'll be a very interesting one to see if some people feel like maybe if the requirements that are being expanded, if it's not a high enough qualification, or it means that you're not qualified enough to be a veterinarian, they may be against that. And I'm sure some people who've maybe had issues finding a good veterinary, maybe in favor of it. So it'll be interesting to see the way that one goes. Proposition 130, funding for law enforcement. So this proposes a statutory change, and then the ballot measure says, shall there be a change to the Colorado revised statutes concerning state funding for peace officer training and support, and in connection therewith, directing the legislature to appropriate $350 million to the Peace Officer Training and Support Fund for municipal and county law enforcement agencies to hire and retain peace officers, allowing the fund to be used for pay, bonuses, initial and continuing education and training, and a death benefit for a peace officer, police, fire, and first responder killed in the line of duty, and requiring the funding to supplement existing appropriations. I think that one's pretty straightforward there. It's allocating $350 million. It's going to go towards training and support, offer incentives right now. And I believe this is something we've discussed on the podcast, but right now there's difficulties in recruiting police officers. And a report that I had read back in late 2022, early 2023, said that there were two big driving factors for the recruiting of new police officers. One of them is the morale aspect and the fact that they do not feel appreciated. And the other factor was the repeal or the getting rid of qualified immunity for police officers, which opens them up to be civilly liable if they were to be sued for being accused of not doing their duty properly. And so I think what this is aiming to do is maybe offer better incentives, such as bonuses. And you see a lot of states offer bonuses and things like that to incentivize people to become a police officer. The military does it too, oftentimes. So we'll be looking at that one. I do think it is very interesting because it does offer a death benefit for a police officer or firefighter or first responder killed in the line of duty. And if I remember correctly, I believe it's pretty high. It's like up to $1 million for the family of that fallen police officer or fireman or woman. So that is Proposition 130, titled Funding for Law Enforcement. And finally, Proposition 131, concerning the conduct of elections. This is a statutory change, so not constitutional. Shall there be a change to the Colorado revised statutes creating new election processes for certain federal and state offices, and in connection therewith, creating a new all-candidate primary election for U.S. Senate, U.S. House of Representatives, Governor, Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer, CU Board of Regents, State Board of Education, and the Colorado State Legislature, allowing voters to vote for any one candidate per office, regardless of the voters or candidate's political party affiliation, providing that the 4 candidates for each office who receive the most votes advance to the general election, and in the general election, allowing voters to rank candidates for each office on their ballot, adopting a process for how the ranked votes are tallied and determining the winner to be the candidate with the highest number of votes in the final tally. So this one it's often referred to as ranked choice voting. It's my understanding that some of the people involved with getting Proposition 131 on the ballot don't exactly like it being called ranked choice voting because they feel it's actually a little bit different than ranked choice voting that has been done in some other states. I think this is one of those propositions, those ballot initiatives that we will work to get somebody on to maybe explain a little bit better. Maybe we can get somebody on for a pro and somebody against and let them discuss their different sizes. But just so you know, this is one where you can vote for people, you can vote for multiple people. There's a point system. And ideally, from my understanding, strategy wise, being number 2 is actually a benefit there, like because you're still getting a high number of points, regardless of who the number 1 candidate is. So I think that's very interesting idea here. That's Proposition 131. Again, Engage the Rockies. We do not support or oppose any ballot measure. We just want to make you guys aware of what's going to be on there. You can find all the details for these ballot measures on the Secretary of State's website. On the Secretary of State's website, it also breaks it down who is supporting this bill, who is opposing this bill, and get an idea kind of if there's certain groups that you really like and you like the work that they do, you can see if they're supporting it or not, or maybe opposing it. And maybe that'll help drive kind of your opinions. I do not know if the Common Sense Institute has released their report yet. I believe they may have. So if you're interested on some of the economic impact on some of these and you want to kind of get ahead of the episode that we're going to do here very shortly on the impacts of some of these ballot measures. I don't know if they did every single ballot measure, but I believe they have done the ones that involve money, such as the officer one, the trophy hunting one, some of those. But again, we're going to get the executive director of Common Sense Institute on here to discuss those in detail and let us know what their report says. So want to thank you again for tuning in. Next week, we are going to record an election judge episode with one of our El Paso County election judges, and maybe actually 2 of them who have a lot of experience, and they're going to tell us about what it's like to be an election judge and how they feel about the processes that are in place for election security. And I'm sure they're going to bring up the fact that in El Paso County, I can't speak for the other counties, there's about 100 election judges that they're short of right now. And I believe the deadline is October 1st. So if that's something you're interested in being an election judge, you can just Google the El Paso County Clerk and Recorder's website and find out how to become an election judge if that's something you're interested in. But want to thank everybody for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.